Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to our next episode of Massive Product. Today in our studio, we have Rolf Mistelbacher. He is the founder and CEO of Fresh Van Root, a digital marketing agency with a strong focus on generative AI and how it changes the lives of digital creators. As for me, I'm your host, Mustafa Kapadia. I help CPOs figure out how to use AI so that they can save their teams 10 hours per PM per week. Rolf, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mustafa. Thanks for hosting me.
No worries. Listen, I've been looking forward to our conversation. I know we've talked a few times, and the topic about how you use AI to do prototyping is top of mind for most product managers. So I'm looking forward to our session today.
Right.
So why don't we start from the top, please? Why don't you just share with our audience what is even possible? Because a lot of PMs don't even know what is possible with AI when it comes to prototyping. So why don't we start there and then we can go deep?
Okay, good. Yeah, I think the main thing that changed is that today, if you have an idea for a digital product or a feature of a software or a new app or tool, then
Hmm.
you can take basically this first rough idea and prompt your way up from just getting feedback on the idea to a clickable prototype. And while like page builders, app builders, all these no-code tools that have been trending the last 10 years mm, already lowered the barrier for like building a prototype.
Yeah.
I think now with AI, it got even easier, like for lots of people, because they are better at like writing a natural language prompt,
Yes.
discussing an idea and saying, "Hey, can you create a landing page for it?" And it renders the HTML and CSS. Compared to there are lots of cool app builders out there, but still they required you. These no-code builders still required you like to sign up for a tool, learn this tool in depth, and still, I mean, you need to know what a database is, what a backend is, a front end is.
Yes.
All
Yeah.
all the basic technology understanding needs to be there to actually get the result you want.
Yeah. I agree. And those are all barriers, right? To understanding how to even build a prototype. Because at the end of the day, PM just needs a prototype to show it to their users or their stakeholders to get feedback. And the quicker we do it, the better, right?
Yeah.
But let me, if it's okay with you, let me go down a bit deeper. Like there's different types of prototypes, right? There's prototypes in which PMs literally will sketch something out on a piece of paper, right? Which is very simple and easy and it's great for initial. Then there's wireframes, and there's tools out there who do wireframes really well, like Balsamic and even Figma do that. And then you can actually have higher fidelity prototypes, which is where Figma comes in which, you can actually have it's a nice layout, you can actually have the brand colors, all of those things that matter. And then from there, you actually have a what you call a clickable prototype, which might just be a shell of a website or a shell of a mobile app in which the users can interact. When you think about AI, where do you think it fits in that spectrum of the 3 or 4 types that I just talked about?
Yeah. I think, as you just said, I mean, there are lots of tools and apps out there right now call themselves AI powered and AI assisted and so on. What you can do right now is if you need a quick visual representation of your idea, I think AI is perfect. You can easily say, render a few HTML pages that are linked together. You can also say with AI, create some sample data that I can use with this clickable
Right.
prototype or HTML files. There are tools out there which allow you to create user experience components. A simple example it would be like the swipe mechanism that made Tinder popular,
Yes.
where you swipe left, swipe right, and so on. So all these user experience elements that have been discussed online, of course, for thousands of times, AI is perfectly capable of creating that user component. So you can still like sketch it and ask AI tools to create a dynamic component out
Yeah.
of the sketch. Or you can just describe it in a prompt and say, create a Tinder-like interface. Instead of dating profiles, show book covers because I want to do something
Right.
like a Tinder-like app for book swiping, for example.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is very easy to do. And of course, depending on your skill level, after that, you can say, copy it over to Figma, fine tune the components, apply
Yeah.
my color scheme. Here is my logo. So then, of course, the more skills you got in a specific discipline, is it wireframing, user
Yeah.
experience design, and so on, the further you can go with this process.
And I like the way you're framing it because you could start off with AI and build a fairly decent prototype. And then eventually, if you want to get to high fidelity, there are tools out there like Figma that you just mentioned that you can then go to a much higher level, right?
Yeah,
You kind of got into it, but let me dig it a little bit deeper. So tell me, in your opinion, when you build these prototypes with AI, what does your process look like?
yeah. So usually I start with an AI chat assistant. So this could be
Okay.
Claude, ChatGPT,
Yeah.
or any of the other chat assistants. So there are lots of articles which AI chat assistant is at the moment the best one to do this and that. But I would say it's not so important if it's ChatGPT, Gemini, or Claude. So the first thing you can do is basically say, criticize my idea.
Hmm.
Um, Let me know what you think is a weak point in this idea. For example, I tried this with a consumer app, which was like something like a LinkedIn networking app for events.
Right.
And it gave me feedback and said monetization will be really hard for this. And how do you make it spread? And the problem you will have is the conference ends, people start unsubscribing your app again and all the basic stuff. But you can quickly get ahead and get like a first feeling of how often has this idea already been discussed and what are the weak points others already discovered in this concept.
Yeah.
Or if you say, I want to do an Airbnb for that, that question has been asked a lot of times online already.
Yeah.
And then I would still stay in the AI chat assistant and say, okay, I'm moving to the next step. I want to create this. Maybe the first step is I want to ask friends, family, coworkers what they think of this idea. Create some marketing copy. These are my talking points about the idea. I want a pitch deck.
Mm.
Create a first draft of a pitch deck, and so on. And then maybe you could say use a custom GPT inside ChatGPT and say, I need a logo for it,
Got
such
it.
as a color scheme. So basic this first level of like creating the content that describes your idea and maybe some
Mhm.
first visuals could all be done within ChatGPT. So you have this central cockpit. And then you say maybe step you are at the prototyping process and you go into Google and say, create a wireframe with AI, create a
Mhm.
website from with AI. How can I publish a landing page with AI on the web or something like that? So this is then like you have to realize, okay, now I have to leave ChatGPT and look for speciality tools that
Yeah.
help me to take the next level, basically.
And so you do a lot of upfront work with ChatGPT or Claude, whatever is your favorite LLM, right? To just kind of flush the idea out and maybe run, at least a few high level features that you want to build. But then it looks like you then eventually move off the chatbots and you go someplace else. So tell me more about where you go and what do you do
Yeah.
with the other things.
So, for example, in the wireframing and mockup area, there are lots of tools right now that reposition or just started out to be like able to write a prompt and create a wireframe, then take
Right.
this wireframe or import it into Figma or immediately publish it and also like then keep using AI to basically say, add the copy about my project on the wireframe. So WireGen is, for example, a very simple tool based. It's launched as a Figma add-on. So you describe the website you want and or the wireframe you want, and you can
Right.
keep prompting. So basically say yes, but remove this component, make the profile picture smaller, and so on. So this would be one example. There's also one tool called Galileo, which renders nice looking user interfaces. So it's not like
Mm.
black and white prototype, but it already renders all these typical components you know from software we all use.
Nice.
Yeah.
And with both of these, how far along do they get you? Do they get you to the clickable prototype,
Yeah.
or do they just
Actually,
get you
clickable.
to the wireframe?
Yeah. So for the clickable prototype, I'm in my experiments when building prototypes this with AI, I often got back into ChatGPT and said, these are my wireframes or in Claude, these are the user interface designs I like. Help me implement them as a web
Got
page.
it.
Yeah. And then you can say link these buttons together and so on. But here is
Nice.
already ChatGPT got, for example, way better at it. But at the beginning, like code generation in ChatGPT was really slow. So,
Hmm.
like you looked at your screen, then it stopped in between, excuse the error, okay, regenerate. And so basically it turned out it felt like programming, you know.
Yes.
So you were waiting. It felt a little bit old school because it took a few minutes until you generated. So I think the limitation is also like, how big is the project you want to build a prototype for? If it's like features for existing tools, doing existing concepts, you will get pretty far. If you
Right.
set out to create a super cool SaaS product from scratch just by ChatGPT, that will be very hard because also of the issue of having no versioning system.
Yeah.
So you regenerate a lot of stuff and then, oh, which reply was the right one? So this is where it gets a little bit tricky right now. But I think these are all things that will be solved.
Well, I mean, you bring up the idea about it's very hard to search for. You forget about prototype. Just searching for chat itself in ChatGPT is hard because it's just the way the interface is, and true for the other LLMs as well. But I do like the direction that you're going in. But I'm also curious. So I like the process. I like the tools that you just talked about. But it does require PMs to do things differently, right? Their internal process has to change. So while you were doing it, what did you end up doing differently, or how did you change your internal process?
I think the the main thing that changed is instead of describing an idea verbally or like handing a piece of paper or writing a Google Doc, the
Right,
main thing that changed for me is, and this is a very specific to every person, if you're not a visual type or not able to like use visual tools, um, it's easy for me now to convince an idea and quickly get feedback. I think there's a time saving depending on what you're good at. Is it writing about an idea? Is it a visual
right.
representation? Is it giving feedback and so on? So I think AI helps you to do 80% of the job quicker. That is the main difference. And I mean, my marketing claim is, so to say, ideas do no longer have to die on the backlog. So basically,
Yeah,
you can use AI to test more ideas or make visual prototypes of ideas because it solves to a big extent the problem of idea execution, I
yeah.
think.
Yeah, you know what? I'm curious how you think about it because there's no right or wrong way, but I do it differently simply because it's very hard for me to exactly put into words how I want the prototype. And I'm curious how you've done it. So what I end up doing is I end up doing a sketch first on paper because that's much easier for me because I know where the boxes are. I know how things
Yeah.
look. I'm like, okay, here's an image, here's text, here's button. And so for me, putting it down on a pen and paper or pencil and paper is much easier, right? And then I take a picture and then I have AI create the wireframe. It's not
Yeah.
perfect, but it seems to give me better results than me just saying, please create a prototype of, I'll use your example of the LinkedIn conferencing app that has a swipe like interface, so to speak. So there must it just goes to show everybody has a little bit different way of doing it, right? Or how you communicate. Have you tried different methods of, and I'm curious which ones you seem to work better and which ones don't?
Yeah. So my personal favorite process still is opening up a notepad file, like writing a few lines about the basic idea, the concept, and basically 20-minute preparation session before I start prompting. I do not
Hmm.
recommend getting into ChatGPT and typing down your idea. So I think it's important to have like this 20, 30 minutes where you
Yeah.
still make up your own mind and then open up any AI powered tool that you prefer. So basically, this could be very detailed. So in some cases, I already have an idea of what the basic design concept could look like. I describe, for example, for a business mobile app, it should be along the lines of the color scheme of LinkedIn. I'm looking for a logo that targets this and that audience. Here are some examples of screenshots of designs or user experience elements that I like. So basically, I have like this 500 word file that have some description for each step of the prototyping process. So for the wireframe, for maybe a user experience component, and so on. And then I start like setting out with a prompt.
I
And
mean, I've seen, and we'll put a link in our show notes as well. But I've seen the demo that you do, which is very impressive. And what I really liked about the demo, I agree with you. The sparring is important because that actually helps you flush your idea out better. But what I found was interesting is that you actually spent some time training the AI on the brand colors, which is great because now you can actually you're feeding it information on the brand color, so whatever it comes out is going to look close and closer to what the users are familiar with. And that's huge too, because you know what? That colors can be distracting. Uh, and so you can actually put in something that looks a lot like what already exists so that users can focus on the features and functionality.
Yeah.
And I think
And
that was awesome.
and sometimes it's helpful if you have like this rough first idea of a prototype and you go to your team or engineering team and they say, he or she comes again with a black and white wireframe.
Yes.
And okay, I could better relate to it because it has some color grading, it has our logo. So it
Yeah.
could go both ways. But
It
I
goes both
think
ways. Yes.
sometimes
Yeah.
brand colors are a distraction of what the thing should do. I agree. That
That's correct.
could
It
be.
really depends on who the user is and what the intent is and who the audience is. I agree. I know you talked about the LinkedIn swipe file app. I'm curious what else type of prototypes you've been able to build so far. And also, what are the type of prototypes that you think you have not been able to build, but you hope AI can build in the future?
Yeah. So consumer apps is something I was like interested in. For example, this Tinder for Books app concept was like the first concept I tried to implement. I did it. It was an old idea I had years ago, but
Mm.
I thought I give it another shot. And I took this app from like generating sample data, wireframes, clickable prototype. I published the app on Netlify via ChatGPT. So I was able to show
Right.
around this prototype and I used a new tool by Typeform to send around a questionnaire. How do you like this prototype? So from start to finish, like to collecting feedback, analyzing feedback, I was able to do the whole process AI assisted. Then I did like the same for a business app, which makes it possible for conference attendees to network, to browse LinkedIn profiles and say,
Right.
you're interesting profile. Do you have time to meet up and so on? And then I also did like specific apps that are only relevant to me. For
Huh.
example, a social media app that uses my specific gradient that I use on all my social media posts. That has like the logo in the bottom right corner. It has a H1 heading and a H2 heading. And I have two input boxes and click generate and I can do a light and a dark version.
Wow.
This app I did completely in ChatGPT. What I did is I published the needed graphic files before somewhere on the web. So I said, here is my logo. Here are the two different gradients. This is the Google font I want to use. So it's on brand. And this is basically a highly customized version of Canva. So like
Right.
a social media image generation app that is only usable at Fresh von Root for posts about Fresh von Root, but it helps us to take shortcuts. And this is like
Yes.
a single purpose app for just one specific company, but you could
Yeah.
do it at scale and every company can say, I use this prototyping process to build apps or prototype apps that I think we need and create some advantage for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have is that public as well so people can see the app that you're talking about?
Yeah. I can provide a link for that. Yes.
Yeah. I think that's great because you basically created your own quote unquote agent or assistant, which is very task specific, but you can use over and over again, which is making you more and more productive,
Yeah.
right? Which kind of gets me to the next question. So doing all this is fantastic, right? I'm curious, what are the benefits or how are you benefiting or advantages of using AI for prototyping? Has it saved you time? Is it quality? Where is it that you're enjoying the most
Yeah.
benefits?
I think that, of course, productivity. So I think it's
Yeah.
saving time. So the last example we just talked about, like, okay, this it just saves a few clicks. It's nothing spectacular, this prototype of a social media image creation app, but I want to do a LinkedIn post. I need a graphic that looks like on brand. I have this quick idea. I create the image. It's a few times faster compared to doing it in Figma or doing it in
Yeah.
Canva. And it took me initially 3 hours to create this app. So this is like, I would say, in time saving. The other part
Yeah.
is creativity. I think, of course, if you have big teams, you can stuff around and collect feedback and so on. So, but the first 80% or the most common sense to get feedback on an idea that was maybe already tried, lots of discussion has been on that idea online maybe already. So you can quickly do this first sprint before sharing the first thoughts about the idea or prototype you want to build. So
Right.
you can use AI to detect loopholes in your thinking early on to get to this common ground. And after that, your creativity is needed to go beyond that. I think that
Yeah.
is And of course, it's like having this creative sparring partner always sitting on your shoulder. I mean,
Yeah,
that is maybe the
exactly. With
biggest.
infinite resources, you
Yeah,
can't go wrong,
never
right? It's
sleeps,
always on.
never sleeps. Yeah, and it can also
Never
drive
sleeps.
you into burnout.
I know you're using the apps that you created. I'm curious, is your team using it too? Or how are they using AI, especially when it comes to using the prototyping process you outlined?
Yeah. So basically, we are evaluating like to do more apps like the social media creation app, so that apps that we can use as a digital agency with our clients. There's
Right.
one cool thing we're currently evaluating. It's called projects inside Claude AI. So you can
Yes.
upload files describing the project. And for us, this is of course lots of agency clients. So we have like basic information about the client, social media performance, for example, content marketing performance. And then we have like all these AI conversations within that project. So we use it in our like to deliver our services for our clients.
Mm.
And that is of course where is a big benefit. And of course, we are able to prototype campaign ideas or product ideas together with our clients. This could be simple stuff like there's a new campaign coming up. Wouldn't it be interesting to have a special snake game that instead of the classic snake interface shows
Right.
of our own visual elements and keeps users on our website, for example. So like this is also an area where I played around a little bit. Of course, all these retro games like Tetris or Snake, Kong, they have been shared online a lot how to code these types of apps. So you can, with a few prompts, create this app and say, replace like specific elements to make it fit to your brand.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my kids, and well, me too, we play a lot with AI to build small games, and they love it. And you're right, it's so creative, it's so much faster. One last question before we go. So I know you mentioned certain tools that you like using. So I'm curious, any tools or app recommendations that you want to share with our audience as they start experimenting with using AI for prototyping?
I mean, this is, of course, a shameless self promotion, but I think watching the demo video in my blog post, because I
Yeah,
jump a lot between different tools, but there are, of course, like I think the simplest way to start is look at the prototype you want to build or the prototype question you have and combine this query or at the stage at which you are, like ideation or
right.
wireframes with AI. The reason why I'm hesitant of giving out very specific tool or app recommendations that the market is so dynamic at the moment.
Yeah.
And
And
I
it's going to
constantly,
change.
yeah,
Yeah.
I constantly discover new apps, and maybe an app I recommend. Someone else is saying like in 3 weeks, hey, I saw this podcast, but this app is already completely outdated. I found this new startup which is doing it way better. Or Claude has released some new model and a new feature which makes it even easier to do
Yeah.
this and that. So it's very, but
Well, have you played around with Claude artifacts yet?
yeah, and this is for great that you mentioned this. This is really a powerful thing. Like this adds this versioning capability, and this is at the moment why I like it so much using it with our clients because
Yeah.
we stay sane. Like you
Yeah.
can point someone and say, "This is the version I liked most. What do you think?" And you can share a link to this artifact. That is really a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think I like what they're doing. There's still so much that you can do with artifacts, but it is changing the user interface with the large language, right? As
yeah,
opposed to just being a chatbot. Now you can do a lot more. Still same functionality. It's just a different way of interacting.
yeah.
Rolf, with that being said, we're out of time, but this has been a fantastic interview. Thank you very much for sharing. I'm going to put all the links that you talked about with your LinkedIn prototype, the process you use, even your social media app that you use, so that people can play around with it. They can take a look at it, and then they can, of course, create something of their own.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Rolf. This has been great.
Thank you.